Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here with Mr. Shadowstreak.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And we are here to talk about the Powerpuff Girls 2016 episodes. The Power of Four, I think, as these episodes are all known. Find Your Bliss, Bliss Reminisce, Blister Sister, Breaking Bliss. Oh, God, I hate this. I hate this already. And Blister Sweet Symphony. I understand now why they went with like a group name for all of them, because individually all of these names are stupid. Find Your Bliss is the one that's the least stupid. And Bliss Reminisce, I guess, but like Breaking Bliss, really?
Blister Sweet Symphony? That one's like okay.
Yeah. But we're gonna be talking about these episodes.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't catch it yet, we are also on the latest episode of the recast. We had Shadow on, and we did talk about the episode Blister Sister in comparison to the original Powerpuff Girls episode Twisted Sister. So if you haven't checked that out yet, be sure you do. But we're going to be talking about all of the episodes here.
It's sure to be a good time, to say the least.
Yeah. So you still haven't reviewed these episodes, but you gave a first impressions back when they came out.
Correct. I made a video back when it came out because a lot of people wanted me to, and it was kind of the big thing at the time. But I was like, I'll save the full in-depth reviews for later, just because if I did attempt to review all 5, it'd take me forever.
Right. So this was the big attempt to get viewership up in the Powerpuff Girls reboot. Like this was Cartoon Network's big chance. I remember they were all over Twitter promoting this new Powerpuff Girl. She's gonna have special voice actress, and they're going to do a big special, and people were talking about it. A lot of people were talking about it. I think some people didn't even know the reboot was a thing. I think this might have been like the first wake-up call, because, Cartoon Network really kind of pushed it at the start of the series, and then they kind of left it to dry for like 2 seasons, season and a half. And then this came
pretty
up.
Much.
Yeah. So I think some people were kind of like, oh, hey, this is a thing that exists. But this was Cartoon Network's big chance for like a number of reasons to kind of get people to watch. And it didn't even pull 1 million views on initial viewing.
Sadly.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's not unusual for this show, or even a lot of shows these days. Unfortunately, viewership is heading down. But you would think that like a big special that hypes up a new character that, it's of a beloved franchise. Even people that watched it because they hated the idea of Bliss, you think more people would watch it, but like they couldn't even strum up the interest. I just find that really sad. I mean, I'm not really a supporter of this reboot, but even I find it sad.
Oh, absolutely. And well, it's funny to me because like I have strayed away from watching television on air, and I'm more of the streaming crowd. But
Same.
Like this was one of maybe 3 or 4 times in the entirety of 2017 I turned on Cartoon Network and watched it live.
Wow.
This was so. I mean, I guess they succeeded in getting my attention, but that's like that and Teen Titans airing in HD were like the only 2 reasons why I ever turned on Cartoon Network in 2017.
Oh, don't worry, they have them on Cartoon Network's website.
Yeah, and I use that.
For reference, another episode about a 4th member of a team that is purple, the episode Bismuth from Steven Universe.
Yep.
2.15 million viewers.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, same sort of promotion type thing. And I mean, that episode is half the length of this one. Less than half, actually. But yeah, so this was like a big effort here, and it just, I don't know, it didn't work. I just feel like that's important to kind of preface all of this with. So, the first one is Find Your Bliss, where Bubbles has an imaginary friend who she calls Bliss, and the other girls don't see her and don't think she's real, and Bubbles does exactly nothing to prove that she's real, and then it turns out that she's real. This was a weird choice to open with because of how, like, I mean, they had to have known that this was going to be heavily promoted. Like, we know Bliss exists.
Right. It's not like it's some big surprising thing. Like we've seen images of her before the thing even premiered. So it's played up as it's supposed to be this big thing, but it's really not a big shock at all to the audience anyways. To the characters it is, but
and like I said, the writers had to have known. This wasn't like some random one-off episode that Cartoon Network decided to randomly promote. Like, they had to have known Cartoon Network was going to blow the lid off this thing. I mean, they knew merchandise was on the way. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Cartoon Network probably approached the writers saying like, hey, do a 4th Powerpuff Girl. We want to make more money. So that was a weird choice. The other part of this episode is that I've only seen a few episodes, and I know that a big recurring element is this trucks in space show that they're obsessed with.
Space tow truck. Yeah.
They go to see the movie, and the movie is crashed by the professor's favorite radio show, this old-timey truck guy.
Which, okay, that in and of itself begs a few questions, because it's like, okay, wait. So does that mean, like, it wasn't a show? Was it a real thing?
Yeah.
Like, where did he come from? I thought if it was a radio show, like, what wouldn't it have been, like, made up by people? Like, or were they just, like, I don't know. That's just really weird to think about.
Yeah, so let's start on that. I loved that. I thought that was of like a lot of the stuff I've seen in the reboot, this like villain is probably the most original show villain type thing that I've seen, because this character is not explained in any shape or form.
Not at all.
Why he's there, other than that he's jealous that the movie is popular, but why is he in Townsville and not like Hollywood or something, crashing the party? Like, the girls don't question it, really. They're just like, oh, well, we gotta fight this thing now. I love that. I love that they don't explain it. Usually that's a bad thing, but for the Powerpuff Girls, I feel like part of the fun is just having these random villains. And since that's not really even the focus of the episode anyway, I was totally cool with how unexplained and random it is.
Right. And, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I thought overall part 1 was probably one of the better parts of the whole 5-part thing. Mm-hmm. Mostly because, you know, I felt that the villain was good, and I also like some of the humor as well.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty good step up compared to a lot of what the reboot was known for when it comes to its jokes.
Judge Dredd.
Yeah, yeah, it beats Judge Trudy. No, I mean, I thought that the one part where Bubbles like is sitting there alone in the kitchen and Buttercup just sees her and she just turns her neck around creepily. I was like, that's the best part of this episode. That was great. I love that.
Okay, so the actual story of like character has imaginary friend that turns out to be real. I've seen this a lot. This happened.
Yeah.
I was watching a Teen Titans episode the other day. Original Teen Titans, and this is in that show, too. And it was in the original Powerpuff Girls. I feel like Foster's probably even did this story, even though it wouldn't even make any sense for Foster's to do it.
Yeah.
Like, the story isn't original, but the way that the episode does it is funny. They have a good time with it. They make Bubbles look like a raving lunatic.
Yeah.
And she's just so, like, cheery about it while being really creepy about it. And it doesn't make 100% sense. Again, that's a lot of this episode, really. It doesn't make sense from a story perspective, but it's funny. It works as a comedy. Other things like The Professor. This is the first episode of the entire reboot I saw where I liked The Professor. I think there was one other one where I was, like, neutral to him. But this is his jokes with, like, the popcorn buckets.
Mm-hmm. I love that part.
Him talking about his laser pet, like he invented something. Good for you, Professor. You did something. And then it's funny because he doesn't realize he's lasering people. And then the laser actually comes in handy at the end of the episode. They did something clever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think the Professor's the worst character in the whole show.
Yeah.
Hands down. So like to see him have a shining moment like this, it's very rare. It's very rare in the show. There have been a handful of other times where I've gone out and said, you know, I really like the Professor and his behavior here. He's like a good father and stuff. But most of the time it doesn't work out. Here, I thought that, especially with the end where Bliss shows herself and he takes it super seriously, that's something that you don't see in the reboot. It was very, very like eye-catching, and it was like, whoa, okay, wait, something legitimate is happening. You know, the tone changed, everything kind of stopped and came to a halt, and it was like, wow, especially considering how like wacky it just was with the giant truck villain, and it just shifts.
It could be stronger story-wise. They could have done a better job at like making it make more sense, because it really doesn't make sense why Bliss only appears to Bubbles. Like, I get why she's staying away from the Professor, but there's not really a reason, and there's no reason why Bubbles doesn't like give more evidence or like something.
Right.
But as a comedy episode that takes a dark turn and kind of sets off this storyline, I think it did really well for itself. And I wonder, spoilers, the Professor kind of stays in this more serious role through this whole thing. Like, do you think that they knew that maybe they'd get people who watch the original show to watch this special, and that's why they made him more in line with the original show?
Possibly. I would, without a doubt, say, hey, they're catching a lot of old Powerpuff fans with it, just with the whole concept in and of itself.
Well, yeah.
But no, I think that that's entirely possible. And it surprises me that they went the more serious road, because I can only think of like The Big Sleep and I don't know, maybe Road Trippin', where he was kind of serious off the top of my head. It's not a very common thing. But yeah, I'd say it's probably likely at the very least.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was good because they didn't, in this episode at least, they didn't sacrifice his comedy side too. Really does feel like they brought back the original professor. The original professor would have acted like this, I think.
He was funny, but he wasn't stupid.
He was stern. Like, the original professor could be stern at times, and like, he was very stern with Bliss, and like, even though we knew Bliss was coming, the fact that the professor took this kind of like dark, serious turn with it, I was not expecting that. That caught me completely off guard.
Same here. I didn't see it coming, and a rarity for the show, it left me wanting to know what happens next.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. So should we get on to that?
Yeah. Why not? Because I have a lot to say about this one.
So let's reminisce about Bliss. Reminisce.
So the professor took Bliss after zapping her in the first episode down to the lab, and he has her secured in this kind of safety portal. And it's all about Bliss's backstory, explaining how she was created, where she came from, why she exists, that sort of stuff. And we get it from 3 different characters' perspectives. We get it from the professor, we get it from Bliss herself, and we get it from Mojo. I think this is the worst one out of all 5.
Really? Okay. Well, I gotta point out, the best thing about this episode is that the Puppet Pals get a cameo. So naturally,
there's that. There is that. Yes.
I'll start just by saying, from a comedy perspective, Mojo, and this is true for the last episode, which he also appears in, I thought Mojo was really funny. I thought he was also, not that his character has really changed that much from the original, he's just less funny, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're just like worse written. But like, I think he was actually funny in this episode and the other one. And I like the gag of them, people continuously telling the girls this backstory that they've already heard. I thought that was funny. And I thought Mojo's insistence on Bliss being his best friend. And he's genuine. We see in the last episode, he's 100% genuine. You think that that's like a mislead or a trap or something. No, he genuinely thinks that she's... and I mean... We'll talk about the retcon, but like,
yeah,
I liked that. One thing I didn't like is that the implication that when we see younger Bliss, she looks like our Powerpuff Girls. So the implication that our girls will grow up to have those freakish hips and proportions, that's unsettling for me. It's one thing for Bliss to have this character design, which I don't like. I don't think it makes any physical sense. But like the idea that Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup will grow up to look like her, I don't like that. All right, say what you want to say.
Starting with the professor, I mentioned that the professor is my least favorite character in the entire show. And what he does right here is one of the things that I think I dislike the most about him.
Can I ask a question before you go further?
Go ahead.
Because I haven't seen as much of the reboot. Is this like rivalry with this lady and her like Astro Boy, Powerpuff Boy? Is that ever like anywhere else in the series?
Nope, it's made up for this one episode.
No, because I was under the way they present it makes it look like this is a recurring What?
No, it's never brought up. Unless it's brought up in a season 3 episode that I haven't seen, it's never brought up.
What a joke. Wow.
That is my issue with that. In the original, the whole point of the professor creating the girls is that he wants to make the world a better place. He wants to create the perfect little girl that can make the world a better place. Here, he wants to beat someone in a competition so he can win a prize for himself.
Which is always, that's always how you want to have children, right? You want to have them so that they can beat other people. That's really competition is the best way to have kids.
It is the antithesis to what he was doing in the original. In the original, he is selfless. In this, he is selfish. It's and it frustrates me because it's like you took one of his best character traits in the original and flipped it around and made him seem like this like fame-hungry jerk in a sense because he just wants to beat someone in a competition.
He's a real Dick Hardley, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, actually, yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
that's a good comparison. But
Wait a minute, hang
I
on.
don't know.
Doesn't this also mean that the professor basically stole the idea for the Powerpuff Girls?
Yes, because in the original, he was saved from falling off a volcano by the girls, and he can't make them out, but he's got a blurry vision, and that
Right.
is like his whole inspiration that leads him to become a scientist to create them in the first.
Because of time travel, if you're confused at home.
Yeah, which good enough. Thankfully enough, time travel isn't screwed over in that episode, which is a good thing because it makes a perfect loop. Yeah, and in this one, it's just like he just takes the idea from someone else. It's like, well, this lady made the perfect little boy, so, I'll make the perfect little girl. That's genius. No one has ever thought of this. Like, it's just...
Wow. So why did he do it again with the girls? I don't remember.
I don't know.
You've made me rethink this episode now.
I don't know if it's directly stated, but I think it's implied that he wanted to try again. I'm guessing he loved Bliss enough and he was so upset that he lost her that he wanted to make them again, but it took him 10 years to do that.
Much like the first episode, I think that this also was funny. I think that the fact that the professors tried every single chemical and that they're still lying around in his lab is so ridiculous.
For 10 years.
Yes, it's so stupid and ridiculous that it made me laugh. I think that was funny. I think Mojo's section in this is funny. And I enjoyed the structure of the kind of 3 different flashbacks. The art style was cool. The throwback was cool. I gotta admit, I'm a sucker for that. The throwback to the original opening and the throwback to the episodes that also reference that opening, which are multiple episodes of the original. So I liked it from that perspective, but you're spot on in that from a story perspective, that really damages a lot of what's to come, and I guess it reframes the professor's interactions with Bliss in a much worse light than I think they were intending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it was intentional, but that's the way it comes off.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you actually were okay with the chemical thing, because a lot of people don't like that plot point.
It wasn't a plot point. It was dumb. I mean, it was a joke, I guess.
I wouldn't call it a plot point, but yeah, a lot of people don't like that. I don't know. They said it came off. A lot of people use the term fanficky, which I don't like using that term, but I don't know.
I can understand. I can see people's perspective on that. But when the professor's acting a little more serious, I can forgive goofier jokes because it's funnier that way. Also, I do want to point out that in all of this, I think the stupidest and most annoying the professor acts, I mean, aside from character-driven stuff, the stupidest joke they do with him is his Ham of the Month Club, where he goes from being serious and talking about Bliss to ooh, my Ham of the Month Club, blah, blah, blah. And silly jokes when the professor is just being serious can work. Like I said, I think the chemical joke worked, but that fast of a shift and just the joke of his Ham of the Month Club, it just didn't play at all, and it really took the tension out of the scene.
It completely takes you out of the moment, because up to this point you're invested with oh, okay, so we're learning this really important information, we need to pay attention, and then it's just oh, okay, where did that come from? Why is this happening? That's the kind of the reaction that I got. Mm-hmm. It's okay, why is this happening? Aren't we supposed to be taking this seriously?
Yeah.
And it kind of diminishes the effect as a result.
Well, because it was between the last minute of the last episode and the first few minutes of this one, we had maybe a solid 3-4 minutes of just not 100% seriousness, but of the tone being serious with some jokes thrown in, instead of the usual Powerpuff Girls Reboot tone, which is goofy jokes, maybe occasionally taking something slightly seriously, probably not. Moral, wrap it up. I will say, because I watched this all together, I do have a harder time kind of parsing out this is an individual episode. I guess because this one, the origin is kind of tied up so much in her character later on, I kind of have a harder time separating this as an episode.
Yeah, this isn't something that I think could be aired individually, unlike, say, the next episode or the previous one.
This is all set up.
It really is. It really serves to essentially establish what we're going to see in the next 3 episodes. Now, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, but my favorite gag of the whole episode is the garage door joke, where Mojo's ready to release Bliss, and he pulls the lever, and then it cuts to the house, and the garage door is just slowly crawling up, and it's the funniest thing. I genuinely laughed out loud when I saw that, and I do not do that very often with this show.
That did feel like a joke from the original. Not stolen from the original, but tonally. And then the way they do it. See, here's the thing. And I think this is why the Ham of the Month Club thing didn't work for me versus the chemicals, because the chemicals are sold with a straight face. The professor's like, yeah, of course, I used all the chemicals. And Blossom's like, why didn't you clean them up? And I forget what excuse he gives, but like they sell it with a straight face. Whereas the Ham of the Month Club is, the professor's all goofy, blah, 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 blah. I like ham. And this joke, he pulls the wrong lever, the thing goes up, and then the professor's like, oh yeah, I always get that one confused. He's not like, oh, I always confuse that one. Ugh, aren't I nutty? Like, it's not over the top.
No, he's just straight up tells Mojo, oh, I always get that one confused. He's very straightforward with it, you know?
And that's how the professor was in the original show a lot of the time. I mean, he had his moments where he could be very over the top. A lot of the humor of the professor was more like subtle, like him deadpanning. The retcon. You got to talk about the retcon. Right?
All right. Yeah, the retcon, or, well, there's a retcon for the original, and there's a retcon for the reboot, ironically enough. The retcon for the reboot, since this one's shorter, is in the episode Halt and Catch Silico, there's a backstory where Silico complains about the girls essentially causing him to become a villain because as a young boy, he made those robot friends, and the girls fought a monster. The monster landed on his house and broke all his robot friends. So he plotted for years to get revenge on them. The problem is that the girls are the same age in the flashback as they are now, but he says that years go by, and obviously he goes from a boy to a young adult. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you're going from a boy to a young adult, that's like 10 years.
Yeah, that's weird.
But if Bliss can age, that means the girls should age.
Oh.
But they didn't age. But then why does Bliss age? It's an inconsistency. It's a continuity
Well, you
error.
see, Chemical X is very different from Chemical.
Well, see, you know what? I knew you were gonna say that because I've heard that before, and I'm like, that is such a cop out. Like, I don't even want to hear it.
It is. You're right. I mean, the Halt and Catch Silico thing. I watched your review on that.
Yeah.
That seems like just a really stupid plot hole oversight that they didn't realize.
It is an oversight. It has to be an oversight.
Versus an intentional, like, saying the girls won't age, because I mean, not that we ever really see them age, but they talk about, like, going to the new school and, like, time has passed.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's just an inconsistency. But as for the original, so
I want to point out that this episode plays on the fact that Mojo was created at the same time as the Powerpuff Girls, and before then he served as the professor's lab monkey. That is directly out of the original, and it's not even Mojo. Here's the thing: Mojo being the professor's like lab monkey and all that sort of stuff. It's in the original show, but it's not a piece of knowledge that you need to know. Like you could have watched 95% of the original show and missed the 2 or 3 episodes where that's mentioned, and the movie, I guess. But it's like it's cool from like a villain standpoint, but like you don't need to know that information. What I'm saying is the reboot could have tossed that information. They could have not included it, but they specifically do include it here. But yet they also include Bliss as a backstory, which doesn't fit with the original timeline for like a number of reasons. The show needs to make up its mind what it wants to do.
I know. It's like you either use all of it or you use none of it, because if you go in between, it's going to cause problems.
Or you make a clear distinction. You say, okay, we're using X, Y, and Z, and then nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, it's like you leave no stone unturned.
Yeah.
Because the problem with Mojo being there, well, first of all, he's green, even though he wasn't green until he got the chemical
Very good point.
on him. But there's that. There's also the fact that, I mean, like, this is another thing that actually just popped in my head. How long do chimps live for?
No. Oh.
Like, would Mojo be that small for 10 years?
Well, judging by the professor's hair, there was definitely the 80s. No.
Well, it's said that
Bliss
is 10 years. Bliss is 10 years older than the girls. Is the thing.
Well.
So that's something that I just thought of.
I mean,
I don't know.
Chemicals.
I have to do my research on chimpanzees. Anyway.
All right, the Bliss special is trash because Mojo lived too long.
Yeah.
You heard it here. How do you feel about this episode? Because you mentioned the one point, and the one point is very important about the professor making Bliss for the stupid, horrible reason. But how do you feel about this episode in general?
In general, the fact that this is all about the backstory, and that the backstory has a lot of problems, is why I don't like it. I will agree that I do like the kind of like 3 perspectives on the story, and especially Mojo's perspective on the story, because it's like it gives you different points of view, and there's some humor in there with Mojo, and it slowly reveals information to you with each new retelling. But I don't like the professor. I think it's the worst one. I mean, structurally it's fine, but it's the content within the structure that I don't think works. It's a mess in terms of the own, not even considering the original, in terms of the own show. It has a lot of errors.
It's also an intention. I mean, a retcon, not like an out of continuity, but like a retcon for the girls, in that, like, not just that they have a sister, but that she was created in like the same exact way, and also that the Chemical X was not an accident, which is a little weird.
Well, to be fair, if I'm going to put on my Powerpuff nerd glasses once more, in the intro for the 2016 series, the professor does not get pushed to knock the, beaker or flask. He doesn't get pushed to knock it, which is another thing I wanted to point out. He spins around and hits it with the back of his arm. So Mojo doesn't push him. So how did Mojo get hit by the blast if Mojo wasn't right next to the thing when it exploded?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like, but because this episode is implying that Mojo was with the professor, which it also implies that he was there when the girls were created, which led to him becoming evil. So, but he didn't push him in the intro. This is what I'm talking about. The structure of the episode is fine, but the content within it creates a lot of problems that weren't really thought out in terms of the series as a whole. It was written for the sense of this 5-part series, and it wasn't given any thought for what it meant for everything else. It was like, we're just going to focus on this story, and it makes sense for this story, even if it doesn't make sense for the rest of the series. That's what it feels like.
The reason why we're going on and on about like what it picks and chooses and is that the Powerpuff Girls reboot from the very get-go had an identity problem. And when you don't create a series that makes sense within itself, if you don't create a set of parameters and rules, if you create this world where some of the original's continuity makes sense, but then some of it's a retcon of that, and then some of it has nothing to do with that, and then Rowdy Rough Boys appear for 5 seconds and you don't do anything. Like, you create a not consistent world that people don't want to spend time in. I don't want to watch this show and constantly be thinking, well, wait a minute, why is Mojo there if he wasn't there? Like, if the professor didn't knock over the flask, and like it's this, I mean, I know it's like super nerd stuff, but it's just like, it matters. Even if you don't think
it does,
even if you don't pay attention to it like we pay attention to it, casually you will still pick up on stuff like this, and it'll be off-putting because of the lack of consistency.
I know some people will just say, well, it's not meant to be the super serious continuity heavy cartoon. I get that. And I'm not analyzing it in the same way that I would like Steven Universe when it comes to that sort of thing, but it's still important.
Yeah.
You can't just say anything goes. Your world has to abide by certain rules.
SpongeBob does. SpongeBob doesn't have continuity, but it has rules, and when those rules are broken, it looks weird and inconsistent and bad, and when those rules are kept the same, it makes sense.
You can suspend your disbelief, but still have belief, in the sense that, like, there are still things you know about the show that have to be true. It's just,
it's about consistency. It's about world building. And I do want to point out, yes, the show generally isn't about these sort of story things, but they're going for it here. When they're specifically going, I can forgive Find Your Bliss for like a lot of the weird stuff, because a lot of the stuff, it's one-off stuff that doesn't really matter, right? The jokes work, and it being weird and unexplained works because it doesn't have to matter. But the rest of this arc is all about Bliss and her relationship with the professor and the girls. And the professor especially has a big part in it. And you're right. If the whole reason for him creating her is a stupid, horrible reason, it really hurts everything else. And if Mojo's connection doesn't make sense, then it's weird. And I also want to point out that the girls don't talk about how the professor lied to them. Bliss has a problem with the professor, but the girls don't. And it's like, his reasons for wanting to keep her contained make sense to me. They do. Right? His reasons for maybe being sore on the subject make sense, but never mentioning it? Why would he never mention it?
Yeah, you'd think this is something that the girls should know. And the fact that they don't even treat it as like an issue. They're just like at first they're like, tell us what's going on. And then he tells them what's going on. It's like, oh, it's okay. She's our sister now. Yay. And that's like,
it's
I mean, if my parents told me I had an older brother or sister from 10 years that had been gone.
That's living on Bird Poop Island.
And they just came back one day, I'd be like, I'd be bothered by that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just be like, oh, hey, how's it going, brother? Like, I'd be like,
yeah.
That's frustrating.
It is. It is. And it's not like this story arc doesn't have the time for that sort of thing.
Let's move on to the third episode because, okay, going into this, I knew that we'd spend the most time on that one. So
let's be brief on this one because we've already spoken about it. So Blister Sister is the first time that the girls take the Bliss out to fight crime with them. Now, why the professor doesn't step in at this point is a question, considering the next episode. I like the bad guy in this episode. I want to say that. Nat, right? This character, this is straight like out of the original stuff where it's a character that has a personal relationship with the girls and the girls don't even realize it or care. And that's like some Jewel of the Isle stuff. Like that's where like or other episodes where there's a villain that has a person like, but they don't even realize, and he's like pathetic as a villain. Like I don't know. I think as a one-up, I was upset. What bothered me? Why wasn't he the same bug that flew into the chemicals in the previous episode?
Right.
That tie-in like writes itself. But okay, whatever. But no, I thought he made for a really fun villain. I also thought that the comedy in this was okay. Like I know it's like a dumb fart joke, but like Buttercup like casually mentioning that the chili is gonna give Bubbles gas, and then the way Bliss reacts, that's the funny part where she's like, that's gross. Like she has like just the smile and it's just like, okay. I thought that was kind of funny. Buttercup offhandedly mentions like, where does he keep getting the money for this stuff?
Yeah, I like that line.
I liked that. But then other stuff with Bliss doesn't make sense. Why does she have the power to do what she can do at the end of the episode? What gives her the power? Mm-hmm. The only thing I can think of is getting away from her obnoxious sisters who keep causing her anxiety. The episode doesn't make that point.
That's actually my biggest criticism with the ending and for the rest of the special is, okay, I get it. Like in the moment, she could just accidentally have this spark where it's like all of a sudden it's like she can do it for like a few seconds and it's just instinct. It just happens right. And she saves the guy and then go back to being unstable. But no, it's just boom. I can do it because I wasn't thinking about it. And it's like, okay. Cause then she goes and she saves her sisters. And in the 4th and 5th episode, she's using her powers. No big deal. It's just like she's struggled with this instability for 10 years, a decade of her life. She has had this problem and it is solved like that. It's just solved. It's like, boom, you know what? I can control everything now. I don't have these explosive tendencies anymore.
The reason why she left, the focus of the backstory. But this episode, the whole focus is every time they go to fight this Nat, Bliss just explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And then she explodes again. And then she's afraid of using her powers again. And then she goes off to get a chili dog. The girls get curb stomped. She doesn't even know the girls are getting curb stomped. You can't say that her powers are because she needed to use them because her sisters were in danger. No, she's just getting a hot dog and there we go. My powers are working.
Yeah,
it's dumb.
Like she got a small adrenaline rush to save this one guy at the last second, and that just it's effortless for her.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to try. She doesn't train or practice or anything. It's just it works. And we'll be getting to this in the 4th episode very, very shortly. But if I do want to go back to two things, which are really brief. One, I don't like the pot shot at Wonder Woman's costume.
Yeah.
Because it's hypocritical.
Yeah.
Coming from this own show. When we have characters like Bianca and Greenwing who also wear outfits like that.
So for context, in the beginning of this episode, and this is stupid, I think, there's a gag about, you gotta get suited up in the right clothing if you want to fight crime with us. Do you get the punchline? Bliss is wearing the costume that's a purple version of what the girls are wearing. Do you know what the punchline is? I'm not going to tell you the punchline. I'll let you figure it out for yourself. But she tries on a bunch of different clothes, and one of them, it's like a Wonder Woman type costume, and then they're like, too revealing. And it's like,
where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, okay, listen, I get what you're going for, but when you do it yourself, you're being a hypocrite. The show is being a hypocrite. Then again, there's a lot of things about the show that's hypocritical, but that's another discussion for another time. The second point I want to bring up is the girls are fully aware of Bliss's instability, and yet they argue over a chili dog.
Yep.
Knowing that Bliss is right there and that it would probably frustrate her. It's not necessary, and the way that the argument develops is very spontaneous, and
but they don't make an effort. Like,
it's not believable. Like, I don't believe that this would legitimately happen. It feels like it had to happen so Bliss could freak out a third time.
And before that, the second time she freaks out, it's because Buttercup thinks that blasting Icelandic like death metal will work. Like, it's forced.
It's not. It is.
Basically, to make a long story short, for me at least, it's just like there's a few jokes I like. I liked the villain. I thought the villain was great.
Absolutely. I love when he's like, I have the strength of Todd. And he's like, so you have the strength of a middle-aged man?
Yeah.
And it's great. I love that line. That one's good.
But otherwise, yeah, the story is complete garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I like Bliss. I feel bad for Bliss, honestly, at this point. To be honest with you.
At this point, yeah.
I really do. The people that she has to put up with in her life. From the professor to the girls to her to me. What's your final thoughts on just this episode so we can move on?
It's okay. If you've listened to the podcast episode, I give more of my thoughts there, and so do you, obviously. Overall, it's better than the second one, but it's probably my second least favorite. It's just kind of there, and I even glanced over it in my original video. I was like, yeah, this is an episode. Stuff happens, but other than Bliss magically controlling her powers for no good reason, it's just,
yeah.
I don't know.
I think the most interesting thing about it is that you can compare it to the original series episode, Twisted Sister. Wink.
Wink, wink.
I mean, I'm obviously plugging, but I do think that has probably, like, the most interesting thing is the comparisons there. But,
Right.
Oh, the other thing, and I want to point this out, the lack of action, I mean, you see it in the other episodes, like the first episode, when the girls fight the truck monster, they just fly around it in the background while you focus on bubbles. Once you're paying attention to it, it's very obvious. This episode, because it's supposed to be, I don't want to say more serious, but the more focus is fighting on this villain compared to the other few episodes that come before it. Bliss explodes a few times, which is just like, it's like flash of white light, and then you see the aftermath. That's not really action. With monster trucks, you don't even get to see them explode. It's a puff of dirt. That's what you see. And then when the girls get beat up by the fly, it's these like flash panels where it's like pow, kerzap.
Yeah. A lot of the physical contact in the show is always obscured by something like that.
And then Bliss's big triumphant victory is having the fly gently tap himself with this fly swatter so he gets pounded into the ground, but it's so gentle, and his suit doesn't even get wrecked. It's just pathetic. I'm sorry. You can do action scenes without having them be violent, but you have to actually do the action scene. Anyway, on to Breaking Bliss. Would you like to give the description for this one?
All right, so this episode basically revolves around, now that Bliss has finally, tamed her powers and she can control them, she wants to go out and fight bad guys with her sisters, but the professor won't allow her to because he doesn't believe she's ready for it. And this leads to a lot of internal conflict with her and her family, and she feels like, she feels left out and she's not sure what to do. That's the general plot synopsis. What do you think of this one?
I have like 4 notes for this, only 4 notes, but just that her powers are magically under control. Like in the last episode, you know what? If her anxiety stopped for a second and she could control her powers, I still think that's bad writing, but like, okay, if it's a one-time deal, like it clicked for her that one time and it worked, that'd be one thing. But no, the episode acts like her powers are just, boom, she got it. Well, that's not, if Bliss is supposed to be a stand-in for like having anxieties, or I don't know what Bliss is supposed to be a stand-in for, to be honest with you. Whatever it is, whatever Donnie's supposed to be a stand-in for.
Oh God, no, don't bring him up, please. What have you done?
Should I talk about Jared too? No,
no, stop.
But whatever Bliss's deal is, this episode does a terrible job of portraying it, because it's just like one and done, right? You solve your problem once and it's gone forever.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, it's very odd to see the professor being this responsible, even like in the last few episodes where he felt closer to his original series self, it was very weird to see him be like pretty dead set serious for like the whole thing. Even mean to a point. Definitely mean, I would say. But like it was very odd to see that. And like I like the professor being more of himself. Honestly, I like the professor even being a jerk, because at least that's more interesting than him being just a complete moron.
Yeah.
Not that I like him being a jerk, but I felt like that's more interesting at least. But I do also feel like these episodes where he's more serious, it's just so out of tone with the rest of the way the reboot has portrayed him that it's weird. There's a Bush's Bakes Beans reference in this episode. I don't know why. I don't know why reference that. The commercials with the talking dog.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just sort of there.
It's not funny. And then my last note, and this is something that I know we're going to want to talk about for a while. So him was me, the elephant.
Let's save that, because yes, you're right. We are going to have quite a bit to say about that.
Go for it.
So I'll just get everything else that I have written down. Okay, I do agree that I get why the professor is being so strict because of his previous experience with her 10 years ago. That's why he's acting the whole way that he is. He doesn't trust her powers because that's kind of what led her to run away in the first place, and that's the reason he lost her, was because she was unstable.
And it's not even that he doesn't trust her, it's that he doesn't trust her powers.
Her powers. And that's basically why he feels the way that he does, but he doesn't
articulate it well.
Yeah, articulate it, because like, okay, so when they're using the simulation room, which I actually do think was really cool that they used a simulation room like they did in the original. That was a nice, subtle callback. Like
the time the Powerpuff Girls fought Fred Flintstone and George Jetson.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The simulation ends and he goes over to the girls, and the girls are like, Bliss is like, I'm ready to fight bad guys, and the girls are all encouraging her, and the professor says that and I quote, he says, her powers are untested. But my issue with that is that if her powers were untested, how would she have passed all the simulations? Because she explicitly states that she passes all of the simulations, so she feels that she's ready.
Yeah.
How would her powers be untested if she was using them in all the simulations? That doesn't make sense to me.
It sucks because I see what they're going for here with the professor being responsible, but for forced drama, they make it look like he doesn't care about her. But it's stupid because you're also, at the end of this, you're supposed to think that he does. And I think he does. I think that's what they were going for. But like, instead of saying like, now Bliss, you're very unstable. Let's try to get a handle on your powers before we send you out in the field. Instead of saying something like that, he just speaks in jerk talk.
His reason is because I said so.
Yeah, he's just a bad parent.
Yeah, he is a bad parent. That's for sure. Because, that would have saved a lot of this, is if the professor was straight up, he was just honest with Bliss, and he's like, I can't afford to lose you again, or something like that. If he's like, I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to lose you again after getting you back. You're finally back after 10 years. I've missed you.
Yeah.
That more sympathetic, reasoning would make me feel for the professor, and honestly, I'd probably side with him.
Here's the thing. I think they were afraid of, and I mean, Bliss is still a flawed character. I do think that they might have been afraid that if we sided with the professor, that we wouldn't like Bliss, and we have to like Bliss because we have to buy her toys.
That's true.
Right?
But at the same time, you could also do, I mean, it's a cliche, don't get me wrong, but you could do it the way that a lot of other things have done, where it's like the teenager wants to be their own person, but the professor won't let, the parent character won't let them because they don't want to let go of them. And that in and of itself would still give Bliss, would still make you want to side with Bliss. And honestly, I like it because it creates a moral dilemma.
Right.
Who do you side with? Who do you think, should be the victor here?
Powerpuff Girls Civil War.
Yeah. Yes, please. I genuinely think it would save this episode. So going into the second half, or actually there's one other thing. We learned that Me can talk and shapeshift.
It's the Octi episode from the original.
Basically.
Where him is posing as a cute little creature and continuously telling Bliss, the professor doesn't love you, your sisters don't care about you, use your powers. Like, he's the devil on her shoulder, literally.
Yeah.
No subtlety.
No subtlety whatsoever. And it's actually foreshadowed at the end of the 3rd episode where it's like there's that zoom in on him and he gives this evil glare and then he farts, which haha.
Well,
funny.
maybe he doesn't fart. Someone else might have farted. Anyway, not that it makes the joke any better, but continue.
But yeah, so it basically gives it away. Okay, we know who the bad guy is. And you may not have caught on to this, but me is spelled M-I-H. Hint, hint, wink,
God.
wink, nudge, nudge.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that.
I didn't
okay,
know
well,
that.
there you go.
I thought it was M-I.
No,
but-
it's M-I-H.
Ah.
And the only reason I knew that is because it's on the Cattle Ship, the game they're playing is Cattle Ship. It's Battleship with cows. I'm pretty sure, I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure MIH flashes up on the board when me gets a point or something.
Oh, interesting.
I could be wrong. I could be misremembering that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens. I know something flashes up on it.
I wouldn't be surprised if Cartoon Network spoiled this in the press kits.
But that leads into the second half where Bliss goes with her sisters and they end up fighting this villain called the Chipmunk Commando, which is basically if Alvin and the Chipmunks met Contra, as I called it in my video. It's this really buff chipmunk who has the powers of Quicksilver and can run really fast, and he beats the girls, which is weird because the girls were beating him earlier in the episode off screen. So I'm not sure why he's suddenly winning the second time.
Yeah.
But Bliss comes in and she doesn't lose control of her powers per se, but she loses control of her emotions. She loses her temper. And that causes her to go a little too strong and kind of like the Chipmunk Commando.
We don't see him again. He gets beat into the ground and
and that's it.
Yeah.
But like he forfeits. He says, "All right, I'm good. Please stop. I give up. You can." And she just keeps wailing on him and just shooting these energy blasts as she just pounds him further and further into the ground. And
can I just stop right here? I just want to say, Raven from Teen Titans. That's all I'll say. Continue.
Okay.
That's what Bliss is. Bliss is a much worse version of that character. Pretty much all the same stuff. Got to control your emotions. Can't let the anger get away or else you'll go really brutally on a goofy bad guy that doesn't deserve it.
Oh, poor Dr. Light.
Issues with her father, which Olivia Olson can't escape from. Which is funny because she works with her real life dad. But sorry, continue what you were saying.
As I said, she loses control of her emotions, not her powers. But the professor shows up and he thinks that because she's out of control, she's not controlling her powers per se. And he's like, I knew it. I knew you weren't ready, this sort of thing. At least that's what I thought, that he saw it that way. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but that's just how I interpreted it. And this kind of makes Bliss, upset because she just wants to be a part of the team and she wants to fight bad guys. Thanks to Mii's intervention and messing with her mind, Mii reveals himself to be him the whole time. Mii is him spelled backwards. Him spelled backwards is me. Wow, big shocker. Yeah. So that leads into another handful of important questions regarding this. And this is probably what you were going to say.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go to your fourth point.
So
now.
they make it explicitly clear in the flashback episode that she found Mii on Bird Poop Island very early on, and Mii has been with her. I think she says she says something like Mii has been with me for 10 years. She says something to like the equal effect of that. How does this make sense for it to be him? Did she have an animal companion that him slaughtered off screen? I feel like that'd be worth exploring. Or did Mii live out a life as an elephant for 10 years while also battling the Powerpuff Girls? It doesn't make any sense. Why they made it specifically so that this little animal has been with her for so long? Why him waited so long? If the Powerpuff Girls didn't exist, who was gonna stop them?
Well, that's an excellent question. And why didn't he do it sooner? Why didn't he just okay, there is a possible explanation in the sense that he wanted her to grow older so that she would get stronger, so that he would get more power because she was stronger than as a child. I can see that. But the thing is why did he wait till this very moment where Bliss was already with the girls? Why would he wait until she came in contact with the girls? Why wouldn't he just use her before that? I mean, obviously it's because, well, we need to have a story.
I want to say something that him in the original show, him his whole shtick was that he showed up to pretty much mess with the girls and ruin Townsville. He didn't really seem to have a clear goal. Like, he wasn't necessarily trying to enslave the world. His thing was chaos and mischief and trying to make the girls miserable. Now, the problem is when you take a character like that and you take a show like the original Powerpuff Girls and you try to tell an ongoing story where this story of Bliss has been built up over now 5 episodes. Him has to have more reasoning, because if his reason is that he just wanted to mess with the girls, he could do that in any number of other ways that would make so much more sense. He could live out his entire life with messing with Bliss on Bird Poop Island, if that's all he wanted. If he wanted to enslave Townsville, he could have done it before the girls existed. Like, his motivations are so unclear and vague and pointless. And again, in an 11-minute episode where it just seems like he just wants to mess with the girls for fun, that makes sense. In a 55-minute story that builds up to this point, he needs to have a reason, and it needs to be explained better than he's been living with Bliss for 10 years. Why? To what end? And this is the punchline to the whole thing. Like, this isn't some random plot point midway through. This is the ending of the Bliss storyline until she comes back. But like this, Raven from Teen Titans, like. The devil needs to use her for I'm not saying they stole it from there, but I'm just saying, if you want to see a better version of this story, you can watch the original Teen Titans. Heck, I'd be convinced that maybe Go would pull off a better version of this story.
Okay, so this is probably on the same lines as the Chemical W being different from Chemical X. You could make the argument that him's basically the devil, right?
Yeah.
So you could make the argument that he just had a second incarnation of himself posing as me for 10 years while he was doing his own thing. And it's like, okay, I guess you could say that, but like,
why?
Still, that's extreme dedication. That is extreme
10 years
dedication
of a life of living with someone for
this. He could have done it at any point. It didn't have to be right now at this very moment. It could have been, a day or two before Bliss ever encountered Bubbles, and he would still basically have the same amount of power. Like, why was he waiting until just now when the Powerpuff Girls had finally come in contact with Bliss? Yep. Like, wouldn't that make it more difficult for him? Because instead of having her completely to himself, they're influencing her now. The girls are influencing her.
There's 80 million more stories you could say that him had a longer plan, like a 50-year plan, and this is going to interrupt it, and that's why he acted. Like, that could be a cool, they could write it that way, but they didn't. There's no reason.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to wait until the optimal time for the heroes to defeat me.
Another thing that leads to so many unanswered questions that it takes you out of the moment because you're left thinking, well, wait a second. Because that's what I did. It's not like I finished the special and then came back to it and thought about it. No, as soon as he revealed that it was him, yeah. I immediately thought, so he was on that island for 10 years.
That's the first thing I thought of. Like, that's literally where your mind goes.
Mm-hmm. It's
specifically points it out. It doesn't say at some point I met me. If they had left it vague, it'd still be questionable. But because they make that specific point hammered in, you're right. It's a huge plot hole.
It's a big issue with it for sure. But I guess that basically wraps up the 4th episode.
Yes.
So we can just focus on Blister Sweet Symphony from this point on.
To move on, to move on with it. So the girls, I don't even remember the sequence of events. Like, the whole thing goes. Okay. Here's the thing. Here's what I want to say about Blister Sweet Symphony. This is probably some of the coolest that the Powerpuff Girls reboot gets in terms of him grabs Saturn and makes it a chainsaw and drags it towards Townsville. That's cool. I'm sorry. That's insane and ridiculous, but that's still cool. Him as like a giant devil terrorizing Townsville, also cool. The fight scenes are still very padded, specifically so, with a helmet. But it is still a step above what you'd usually see on the series. So there is that cool factor. But there's just a lot of stuff that's I don't know. How do we talk about it? Because it's just a big cluster.
Right. So, that's the whole episode is the girls trying to stop him from annihilating the Earth. That is That is basically the entire plot. Like, there's nothing more to it. It's very basic, but there is a lot of things that happen in that time. It has a lot of things that I like relative to the rest of the show. Again, keep that in mind. Relative to the rest of the show. The action in this final part is better than most of the show. You know, a lot of the things that him does, it's more menacing in comparison. I'd still, any day I'll take an episode of the original over this, but it's better. So I can give it some credit for that in this because it's better, but so, I mean, gosh, I don't even know where to really start though. Like,
all right, I'll point something out then. Here's a big thing. Okay, so Mojo in this episode, he's funny. I love him. He comes in wanting to save the day and save his best friend Bliss, and he just gets curb stomped every time. He comes in, I think, 3 times in this episode, and he's just completely treated like a joke. But the 3rd time, he has this random flail bomb thing, and here's how they defeat him. The Powerpuff Girls in their giant fusion thing, Bubbles kicks the flail bomb with her tail into him, and him dies. Or, you know, it gets defeated. That's
dissipates.
That's how it ends. Or that's how him is defeated. How does that... You cannot treat Mojo like a joke and then have this unexplained random Deus Ex Machina ball. It's ball of win, I'll call it. Just get casually kicked with a tail towards the villain. How did that need the 4 Powerpuff Girls? Tell me this special. Where's the Blister Sweet Symphony in kicking a ball at the villain? How did that require 4 Powerpuff Girls and Mojo?
Yeah, that is actually a very good point because, like, nothing about this ball is explained. It's just like, I have the solution. Now let me throw it at you. Oh, it went 3 feet. That was fine. But like, it's just, what is it?
I don't know.
How does it work? How does throwing it, like, how does that work? How does it separate them? What is the science behind this? Like,
if they were smart, it would have something to do with Chemical W, which was introduced earlier in the special. If they were smart.
See, here's the thing. They never, ever, 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 ever use Chemical X or Chemical W in this case. They never use it for anything.
They used it to turn the mayor back into normal in the original show in a great episode.
We don't talk about that episode. Well, actually, we did talk about that episode on your channel. You guys should all go listen to it. It's really good. No, but other than the intro and Chemical W in this backstory, the chemicals are never brought up.
And that's such a big part of, like, if you wanted an out of nowhere explanation for how to defeat him, Chemical W would, I mean, it wouldn't make sense, but it at least thematically ties into something.
It does. It just feels like it's ignored more than anything else. And you're right, that Chemical W would be, I mean, it would definitely be something to go off of. And it's like, okay, you know what? I can buy that. That's fine. I'll let that go. I'll accept that. But no, we just get a spike ball that it works because it works. That's why.
Do you think that when the girls form their monster thing with the helmet?
Okay. Everything else aside, I think the pun is great. The mutilator. And it's a cat, like Mew. I love that pun. That pun is good. It's one of the few puns that the show gets right. Listen, when you have episode titles like Odd Bubbles Out or Electric Buttercup.
Dude, why go outside of this episode when we have Blister Sweet Symphony?
Yeah, I mean, like, literally in an episode that I'm about to review, or it might actually be out by the time this discussion goes up, there's this part where Bubbles crosses the river, and she's like, "Mission Bubbles accomplished." I'm like,
that's not
even a pun. That's not a pun. You just took "uck" and made it Bubbles, so it's not accomplished. It's Bubbles accomplished. Like, what is this? So, like, I appreciate the mutilator for so many reasons because of that. Because it's actually a pun that actually works and is actually relatable in the episode itself.
Is the helmet remark a deliberate, like, take that?
Yes, it has to be. I don't see why it wouldn't be.
If you don't know, the Powerpuff Girls in this series have these elemental powers, these Green Lantern powers as everyone calls them. And basically they are things that go around the girls that shield them from having to make any contact with anything. I know Shadow defends this, and I think the powers in general are decently cool. Like they're interesting. They give the reboot something. I will say that. But I absolutely agree that it just serves to pad the girls to have more non-action. They could use them in a more action-heavy way. It doesn't have to be violent. Here's the thing. It has to be action-heavy. Doesn't have to be violent. That's all I'll say. I've said it before. I'll say it again. But they make an intentional line here where Buttercup is like frustrated that Blossom formed a helmet. And they say something about being padded. And I thought that might have been an intentional reference. I don't know. Like, it's just going to serve to make the critics that hate that stuff more upset. I don't think it's a funny line or anything. I remembered it, I guess.
No, I feel like it was probably intentional. It was probably a subtle thing that only people who really cared about it would pick up. And, okay. You said I defended. I do defend it in the episode that it's premiered in. Because in the episode that it's in, the Green Lantern powers are actually used for combat, and yeah, I mean, sure, okay, maybe it cushions the girls, but the episode Power Up Puff is one of the most action-heavy episodes of season 1. So
very true, very true.
But that's the only time I really do defend it. Anyways, back to the episode. Another thing that is kind of about him's tyranny is he's transforming the people and the objects into these random things. I guess that's sort of his way of being evil.
Yeah.
I mean...
yeah.
I don't know. Like, there's some parts where it's like, okay, but then there are other parts where he, like, transforms the building into a pickle in a diaper that cries, and I'm like, what is this? Like, why?
Because the mayor isn't in it, but you gotta remind people that the mayor likes pickles somehow.
Yeah,
somehow.
I guess.
I don't know.
I guess. I mean...
No, you're right. Like I said, Chainsaw, Saturn, coming towards Earth, super cool in a crazy way. Transforming people into kind of random things that you could make it interesting, but they went with kind of like cartoony like animals.
It's supposed to be menacing, but it's not because of what they transform into.
Yeah.
Like the professor turns into
a speak and spell, which is a callback. At least it's a callback.
That's true. To the fourth episode, the episode prior.
I liked the professor rushing into battle in his battle car. That was cool.
Yeah, and he has the ray ready, and it's fast.
Yeah,
which is something we don't get a lot of, but it's very, very fast. He gets there, he pulls the laser, he's like, "Girls, I'm gonna shoot him," and then him zaps it before he can
action
shoot it.
dead.
One thing, okay, about the Saturn thing, I like it because it's ridiculous and it's evil, but like when you actually like, okay, it's a cartoon, so we can let it slide, but when you stop and you think for a second, wow, him just screwed over the entire solar system. Like
I thought you were gonna complain about the science of it, because I was about to be like, I mean, rule of cool.
No, I'm talking about the fact that like him just screwed up everything by doing that. Like, not only did he screw over Earth, he screwed over Mars and Venus and Jupiter. Like, all the planets are out of whack now. Some of them might fly into the sun, some of them might fly, like, he's just messed up everything.
At the end where the professor's like, the cosmos are in chaos, and then it's a very quick clip of like pinball machine action with the planets. That's great. It's funny.
That's what I'm talking about. It's like, wow, not only did him like mess up Saturn and Earth, he messed up everything. like wow. But yeah, I do like that.
What did you think of the anime influence, the Powerpuff Kaiju?
Okay, so I feel like that was the perfect moment to reference Powerpuff Girls Z, and as far as I'm aware, it is not a reference to Powerpuff Girls Z in any way, shape, or form, which is disappointing. Because, again, it would have been the perfect moment to reference it.
What does Bliss even do in this episode? I can't remember.
She's possessed for the first, 7 minutes,
Right.
And then she gets out, and she's like, all right, guys, let's form a giant... I guess that's Bliss's Green Lantern power, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's...
Her sister's powers are only used for the sword.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much, I don't know if intentionally, but it does very much evoke Dynamo. Whereas, this is like a giant monster that was a giant robot. It's an amalgamation of all the girls. It's not the same thing, but it's still, pulling from the original in some way. It still can't escape that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't feel strongly, liking or disliking. I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing an anime thing. Like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I had no reaction to it, really, honestly. Oh, okay.
My first reaction was, are they really doing this? And then it was like, oh, they're doing this. Okay. So I get, okay. Let's just see.
Yeah, Bliss's big contribution was hugging her sisters. That's all. That's what I remember.
Yeah, the power of love wins. Yep, they saved the day with the power of love.
So then I guess there's just really two more things that are big that I wanted to talk about that are kind of sucky. I will compare Bliss to other characters on other shows where when they do morally ambiguous actions, they get treated as a morally gray character. Here's the thing. Here's how you can tell. Simple litmus test. If you can tell if a kid's cartoon is going to be interesting, if an action cartoon, do the characters get to make decisions that are morally ambiguous and are treated like they made morally ambiguous decisions? Or is the episode always going to play it off like, well, they were brainwashed or manipulated, or it's okay because we love them anyway? If everything's always all right, then it's kind of a boring, flat show where the heroes can never be wrong. This episode glosses over the fact that Bliss gave in to him. It glosses over Bliss beating that nut guy into the ground. And he's never seen again. And she doesn't the episode completely glosses over everything because Bliss helped save the day. And I'm not saying that Bliss is 100% responsible. She was manipulated, of course. But you would think that they would, feel maybe slightly betrayed or, have any reaction other than just, well, she helped save the day, so she's just a good guy.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact that the professor was kind of unreasonable to her, and they gloss over that as well. So, it's kind of that issue on both sides, both characters.
If him didn't show up, this would 100% be more interesting. I feel like they were setting up something with the conflict of the professor, and then they just gloss over all of it because they have a literal devil on her shoulder telling her to do bad things, and then all guilt is absolved because of that. And it's not interesting that way. I still would have liked Bliss if they made it so that, she admitted that she's got anger issues, because she does.
Yeah.
They gloss over it. There's that, and then the other thing is the big groaner at the end where she leaves to go realign the planet. Stupid X, Y, and Z reason why she can't be a member of the main cast. That's all it is. That's all I'll ever see. I mean, that's what I saw in Bismuth, the first round with her, but even Terra in Teen Titans to an extent, you can tell when a character is a gimmick character that's going to be around for a short while, and when they don't give a good reason. At least Terra, they give her a good reason to leave the show. I talk about Teen Titans a lot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a good show.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, status quo is God, I guess, is basically what you can get from it. I mean, I don't know. Would I necessarily want Bliss to be a permanent character? Probably not. So I'm not exactly upset with it, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
No.
When it comes to a story like this, it's it's bound to happen. More often than not, they're gonna be written off in some way. Whether it's they die at the end or they go away somewhere.
See, I think that Bliss would have given the show more of an identity. I mean, again, from the start, we knew, based on the stunt voice casting and all, all this other stuff, she was never going to stick around. I feel like that maybe would have given the show some sort of angle that at least differentiates it from the first show or something.
That's true.
I'm not saying Bliss is a great, amazing character or that her inclusion would have turned the show around, but at least it would have done something, maybe. Conclusions. I guess here's what I'll say, and maybe this will come as a shock after all we've talked, but I was pleasantly surprised. This whole arc was funnier than I'd ever seen the reboot being. Across the board, pretty much every episode had jokes that I laughed at, which is a lot more than I could say about some of the reboot episodes, many of them. The professor, yes, definitely some also flawed characterization, I guess in the other direction of making him too mean, but I would prefer mean professor to stupid professor. I think that he's much more interesting this way, and in some episodes, like the very first one, his character is great. And this whole thing definitely, or at least the last two parts, had more action than any of it. So in a lot of ways, I was surprised because it's better than the rest of the series, I think. Not necessarily the best episode, but in general, it's better than the rest. And because it's ambitious, it tries to do something here. It doesn't pull it off perfectly. There's lots of plot holes. There's a few episodes that are flat out not good. And there are creative choices that are very head-scratching. But it tried to do something, and it tried to do something the original show never did. The original show never had a story arc. It had a few ongoing plot lines that show up in 2 or 3 episodes, but that's it. this did something that if the rest of the show was just like these 5-episode arcs or something, that could be something. I think with enough practice, they could do better. I don't think this was so broken beyond repair that like I never want to see them touch another story arc again.
You're in luck because they're doing another I
Oh.
believe it's a 4-part story arc for season 3 special.
Interesting. Well, I'll say that I think they could get something solid. I won't say 100% because they could also turn out something way worse than this, 100%. But I do think that like this shows somewhat of a potential, and it does show something. I see something here, and that's my conclusion on the arc. What about you?
Overall, I think that it's better than a lot of what I've seen from the show. If I were to put it in top 10, it would be probably the number 10 spot.
And for perspective, you've definitely seen a lot more of the show than I have.
I've seen, at this point right now, I've seen all of season 1 and all of season 2 and like the first couple episodes of season 3. I'm not completely caught up, but I'm almost caught up. And out of everything, I wouldn't say, it's definitely not top 5. If it were top 10, it would be number 10, maybe number 9 spot. But as a whole, I think I do agree with you in the sense that I thought that, there were some decent jokes in there. There were a few moments where I was like, that was really good. That was really clever. Equally, there were moments where I groaned. So yeah. I don't know. I felt like it was kind of 50-50 on that sense. I think
I would still rather something that has high points that made me laugh and made me be interested than something that is flatlining right in the middle. Just kind of like, okay, it's just here.
Something is better than nothing. I completely agree there. Something is definitely better than nothing. I am inclined to say that this is probably him's best appearance in the entire reboot.
Oh, no. No.
I know.
I don't know. His appearance in Tiara Trouble is pretty hard to top.
Well, I mean, if you consider him sitting there and kicking back for 5 seconds hard to top, then yeah. But no, gosh, other than maybe Imagine That, this is probably his best episode because Electric Buttercup's okay, and then he barely does anything in Tiara Trouble or Secret Swapper of Doom. So I would, I'm inclined to say that. I've already shared my issues about Part 2. That's definitely my least favorite, is probably my favorite. Part 5, it has its flaws, but again, relative to a lot of the rest of the reboot, I do like it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting, and it's good. I do like that him is genuinely evil. We have there's genuine evil, there's genuine threat and danger, which is something that is not abundant at all in the show. Very rarely is there a threat. Mm-hmm. A lot of the villains are more jokey and don't really have much menace behind them, the way that him is sending Saturn to cut the Earth in half. So I do like that. Again, Bliss as a character, I like that she's not one note. I don't really care for her design, but personality-wise, she's fine. I like that she's flawed and she grows, albeit very, 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 very suddenly. Yeah. But overall, I do have hopes that the Small World special is a better, overarching type story than this one. I don't think it's going to be played up as much, just because based on what I've seen, it doesn't really have a gimmicky character or something that makes it
right
like this huge ratings grab or something. But would I recommend this? I definitely say, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it, just because there is a lot to look at, think about, and talk about. But it's not a masterpiece by any sense of the word. It's better than a lot of season 1, but it's not my favorite of the reboot.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend Find Your Bliss. Of anything, yeah, that episode, if you liked the original show, that's an episode where the professor does not have his annoying reboot qualities, and it's a funny episode, and it's weird, and it does feel like I guess there is an episode where a villain comes out of a movie screen in that too, but yeah, no, I would recommend at least that one. And but here's the thing, I guess, just that got me thinking, just like if if this got me, right? Like if wasn't watching the show and I'm not, and I saw the ads for this and I saw this special and then I watched any other episode of the reboot, I would feel, I don't want to say misled, but I would like, and I think ultimately that's why this fails as a ratings grab. I mean, it failed to grab the ratings just for this, but I do feel like anyone who might have liked this, I don't think they'd like the rest of the show.
No, it's not a good representation of what the whole series is about.
Yeah, and I mean, not that everything has to be that, but when this is kind of like a big push for like, let's try to boost the ratings with this. And I mean, I like it probably for the reasons that it isn't like the rest of the show, but I do still kind of find it like, yikes, if this was their plea, then their plea was to basically make a different version of the show they made. And that's a little sad. But hey, Jared's not in it, nor is Donnie.
Thank goodness.
All right. So, if we haven't plugged it enough, we do talk a little bit more about the Power of Four over in the recast. If you haven't seen it, check that out. Thank you very much, Shadow, for being here. PIEGUYRULZ, out.
Bye, guys.